My name is Dr. Emily Williams, and I've been working as a night shift physician at St. Mary's Hospital for over a decade. Nestled in the heart of New England, this century-old hospital has seen countless patients and heard numerous stories. It was a bitterly cold night in January, the kind where the wind howls like a banshee, and the snow blankets the world in an eerie silence. The hospital was unusually quiet, with only a handful of patients in the wards. I was making my rounds in the oncology unit, a place that had always given me an uneasy feeling. Around midnight, I noticed a light flickering at the end of the hallway near room 313, a room that had been unoccupied for months due to renovations. My first thought was that one of the bulbs needed replacing, but as I approached, I felt a sudden chill. The air grew heavy, and I could hear the faintest whispering, almost like a distant conversation that I couldn't quite make out. "Help me, please!" I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't uncommon to hear strange noises in an old hospital, but this was different. The voice was clear, distinct, and undeniably human. I turned on my flashlight, sweeping the room, but there was nothing out of the ordinary, just an empty hospital bed and medical equipment covered in plastic sheets. Trying to shake off the feeling of unease, I left the room and continued my rounds. I listened intently as Mary recounted the story. According to hospital law, a young woman named Sarah had been admitted to room 313 in the early 1980s. She was suffering from a rare and aggressive form of cancer. Despite the best efforts of the medical staff, Sarah's condition deteriorated rapidly. She would often speak of seeing shadows and hearing voices, but her claims were dismissed as hallucinations caused by her illness. One night, Sarah was found dead in her bed, her face contorted in a grimace of terror. The cause of death was never determined, and since then, strange occurrences had been reported by those who ventured into room 313. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I decided to spend the rest of my shift investigating. I retrieved a digital recorder from my office, intent on capturing any unusual sounds. As I approached room 313, the whispers started again, louder and more urgent. The following night, we decided to conduct a more thorough investigation. We enlisted the help of Father Thomas, the hospital chaplain, who had dealt with such matters before. Armed with holy water and prayer, we returned to room 313. As soon as we entered, the atmosphere changed. The whispers started immediately, louder and more desperate than ever. Father Thomas began to pray, his voice steady and calm. He sprinkled holy water around the room, and the whispers turned into wails of agony. "Leave this place. Free the spirit trapped here," Father Thomas commanded. The temperature plummeted, and the lights flickered violently. Shadows danced on the walls, coalescing into a dark, oppressive presence. I felt an icy hand grip my shoulder, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Father Thomas continued to pray, his voice unwavering. "In the name of the Lord, I command you to leave." The shadows swirled, and a deafening roar filled the room. The air grew thick, and I could feel the pressure building, as if something immense was about to burst forth. With a final guttural scream, the shadows dissipated, and the room grew still. The temperature returned to normal, and the oppressive feeling lifted. We stood in silence, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. The whispers were gone, and the room felt lighter. Over the next few days, I monitored room 313 closely. There were no more strange occurrences, no whispers, no shadows. It was as if whatever had been trapped there had finally found peace. The peace at St. Mary's Hospital was short-lived. A few weeks after the exorcism, the strange occurrences began again, though now they seemed more focused and sinister. One particularly cold night, I was finishing my rounds when I heard a commotion from room 313. Despite the uneasy truce we'd felt after Father Thomas's ritual, I couldn't ignore the sound. I rushed to the room, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside, I found one of our newer nurses, Carla, standing in the center of the room, her face pale and eyes wide with terror. Father Thomas returned the next day, his expression grim. He listened to our accounts and examined Carla, who remained in a catatonic state. He suggested we perform another ritual, but this time with more intensity and preparation. We gathered that night, a small group of staff members who had witnessed the unexplainable and were determined to find a resolution. Father Thomas brought additional holy water, crucifixes and relics, preparing for what he believed would be a more challenging battle. As we entered room 313, the temperature dropped immediately, and the whispers began again. This time, they were not just desperate, they were angry. "Leave us alone. You can't help her." Father Thomas started his prayers, his voice strong and commanding. The lights flickered, and the shadows seemed to grow, twisting and writhing around us. The oppressive feeling was back, stronger than ever, pressing down on us from all sides. "We need to remain strong," Father Thomas urged, continuing his incantations. "We are here to help you, Sarah. We are here to help all of you." The room erupted in a cacophony of voices, each one more desperate and terrifying than the last. I could feel the cold seeping into my bones, and it took all my strength to remain standing. Mary held my hand, her grip tight and reassuring. Suddenly Carla, who had been brought in on a stretcher, sat up, her eyes wide and filled with terror. She began to speak, but it wasn't her voice. It was Sarah's. "He's here. He won't let us go. He's coming for you." The shadows converged, forming a dark, menacing shape in the center of the room. It loomed over us, radiating malice and anger. Father Thomas continued his prayers, his voice unwavering, but the shadow seemed to grow stronger with each passing second. In a moment of clarity, I realized that we had been focusing on the wrong spirit. Sarah wasn't the malevolent force. We were dealing with something much darker, something that had been feeding off the fear and suffering of the patients in room 313 for decades. "Father Thomas!" I shouted over the noise. "It's not Sarah! There's something else here!" His eyes widened in understanding, and he shifted his prayers, focusing on banishing the malevolent entity. The room shook, and the dark shape roared, its form flickering and twisting violently. The lights above us shattered, plunging us into darkness, but Father Thomas's voice remained strong, a beacon of hope in the oppressive void. Slowly, the shadow began to dissipate, its form breaking apart and dissolving into nothingness. With a final echoing scream, the entity vanished, and the room fell silent. The temperature returned to normal, and the oppressive weight lifted. Carla collapsed back onto the stretcher, unconscious but breathing steadily. We stood there in the aftermath, the silence almost deafening. Father Thomas crossed himself, his face pale and exhausted. "It's over," he said, his voice filled with relief. "The darkness has been banished." Carla woke up the next morning, her memory of the events hazy and fragmented. We didn't push her for details, grateful that she had survived the ordeal. Over the following days, the atmosphere in room 313 continued to feel lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted. But the experience left its mark on all of us. We had faced something beyond our understanding, something that defied the laws of nature and reason. St. Mary's Hospital continued its routine, but we who had witnessed the darkness knew that some things could never be explained, only endured. Life returned to normal, but the memory of that night stayed with me. Whenever I passed room 313, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and lingering unease. We had banished the darkness, but the whispers in the night had taught me that the past never truly stays buried. It lingers, waiting for those who dare to listen.